With HIV, I've gone through a lot. In my life, I've had 3 children, and I've lost all 3 children to HIV.
Onapo bantu bakwe bati bakumwa bapola so naine wamene nichetekera nizapola.
The way I was feeling in me, it was like I was already dead. And I never had any hope that again I would come back to life. And after I started my medication, it was like I was being resurrected from the bed that I was sleeping in. I'm ready to take my medication for the rest of my life. For the sake of my daughter, I want to see my daughter growing. I want to see my daughter maybe also getting married so that I could be celebrating as a mother.
Oh, 'cause blue skies are coming, but I know that it's hard.
Those are scenes from a short film called The Lazarus Effect. It's named after a phenomenon, a word coined by doctors and by aid workers and by people of faith across Africa, based on the story we just heard, the story of Lazarus being raised. They called it the Lazarus Effect when they've seen lives being transformed from the edge of death back into life. And it's all rooted in the good news of this story that we gather around today. And in the good news of Jesus saying this illness does not lead to death. As we gather this morning around the story of this man named Lazarus, it's my prayer that this is a gathering of hope. Over the next 2 weeks, we will be joining Christians all around the world, and we'll journey together into the story that's at the center of our faith, the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus, the one that we call Savior, the one that we call Lord, the one that we call Christ, Son of God. It's a story that takes every one of us and pulls us down into the grave, only to be called forth into new life through the good news of resurrection. It's a story that does not ignore the reality of death, and in doing so, it taps into a new hope that defeats death forever. So as we gather around the tomb of Lazarus today, this story wants to have a meaningful impact on us. This story is hoping, it's begging, it's pleading to actually mean something for us. It wants to be more than just words that we read off of a page. You see, we can gather and read a good story about resurrection, or we can gather here and be resurrected ourselves. We can participate in the resurrection of others and in God's unfolding new world. And it all comes down to whether the Bible is your storybook or whether it's actually your story. And there's a lot at stake, my friends. Because the world that we live in doesn't need stories about resurrection. The world that we live in needs to experience hope, needs to experience resurrection for real. The world needs people that have been given a hope that's bigger than death and bigger than suffering. It wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago, that it appeared that the grave was going to win, and that the grave was going to have the final word for an entire continent of people. For too many people in our world, this disease, this virus called HIV, had taken hold of the continent of Africa, and it was an unstoppable force. 20 million lives lost. I can't even fathom that number. 20 million lives. Entire communities destroyed. Children orphaned. People watching every single person that they love die one at a time. Babies being born without even a chance of having a life. And to be honest, the world was slow to respond. And to be even more honest about it, the church was even slower. I remain convinced that it was because for many years, AIDS was connected with the gay community, and too few Christians and Americans had the courage to respond. And I don't say that as an accusation so much as a confession, because the only finger I have to point, I'll point right at myself and pray that God and the millions that have suffered have mercy. Thankfully, however, that wasn't the end of the story. That was not the last chapter in God's story. The story doesn't end with the words, "Lazarus is dead." The presence of God among us, the living presence of Jesus, has already promised that this illness does not lead to death. Rather, to reveal God's glory. And a new chapter has been written already. God has been on the move in this last 10 years. This new chapter has been written, and it's a story that's unfolded not in laboratories, as new antiretroviral medications have become a reality. It's a story that's unfolded in clinics that have been built all across Africa, as people have literally gone to the ends of the earth, not only to bring these treatments, but to take on the massive task of setting people free, not just from disease, but from the vicious cycle of poverty that surrounds it all. Just a few years ago, in 2002, these treatments were available, but they cost about $10,000 per person every year. Even so, 50,000 people were able to be treated, and those lives were saved, and it was a massive achievement. But it was only the beginning. Today, we're living in a world where what seemed impossible just a few years ago is unfolding at this very moment. Treatments that cost $10,000 per person now cost $140 per person a year. Less than 40 cents a day to keep someone alive. And not just keep them alive, but to give them life and save their lives. This illness does not lead to death. The 50,000 people that were being treated have become 4 million. 4 million lives that are here today because God has been on the move. People that will go on to impact the next generation of this world. And this new chapter to the story is unfolded in laboratories, and it's unfolded in clinics, and it's also unfolded in the halls of power around the world, including right here in the United States. It became possible because people all over the world insisted that this was not just a matter of charity. People all over the world insisted that this was a matter of fairness, that this was a matter of justice, that nobody's ability to live should be determined solely by what part of the world they were born in. No child should face that from the moment of birth. Where you live should not determine whether you live or not. And as the people saw what was happening and what was possible, and they insisted upon justice, and the leaders of our world took notice, and they began doing the right thing. And they did incredible things. President Bush started the United States President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. We call it PEPFAR. The United Nations worked internationally to start the Global Fund to fight AIDS, along with tuberculosis and malaria, and a partnership between governments and businesses and individuals. God has been on the move. Scientists and doctors and nurses have been on the move. Presidents and senators and governments have been on the move, and businesses and business leaders and humanitarians, even musicians and artists, have all been on the move. And yes, since God has been on the move, God's people have been on the move too. People motivated by the love of God, living out their faith in the world, have been active in every part of what has unfolded as this story's been written. And today is just a reflection of that, as over 1,500 churches like ours take a moment to pause, to pay attention to this, and to commit ourselves to continuing this story on this Lazarus Sunday, because there's still the next chapter that needs to be written as this story unfolds. With millions of lives already being saved, millions more still wait. But today they're not waiting to die anymore. Today they're waiting to live. We have the treatments, we have the right strategies and the right resources to reach them. We only need to maintain the will to make it happen. so that these people will know that they're not waiting for the grave, but that they're waiting for resurrection. This is why millions of people around the world have joined together in the One campaign. This is why so many of us, even here, have sent emails and we've written letters to leaders and to newspapers, and we've made phone calls to remind our neighbors and to remind our leaders that these people are out there and that we have promises that we've made to them that we need to keep. Even as our leaders work to keep our own government budget in check and keep our own economy moving. This is why 5 of us, including myself and Susan Best, were thrilled to spend almost an hour a few weeks ago speaking with advisors to Senator Toomey about this and about this important story, encouraging them to continue looking for solutions and continue to respond. And we were able to deliver to them the names of 3,000 other people in Pennsylvania that stood by us as well. And the same thing's happening everywhere, all across the nation, in the offices of elected leaders of every political stripe, because this isn't about a political agenda. It's not about a political party. This is about saving lives. It's about every one of us living like people who believe in resurrection. It's about refusing to treat the Bible like our storybook and instead participating with God in the world and writing our part in God's unfolding story, in God's good news for the world. Because all of our faith and all of our prayer, all of our worship, everything that we call sacred and gather together around, all of it amounts to nothing if it doesn't change reality, if it doesn't send us out into the world to bring new life. Resurrection means nothing if we keep it locked up in our churches or if we keep it locked up in the covers of a book. It only matters if it springs forth and comes out just like Lazarus came out of that tomb. If we step out of our graves, trusting in the hope given to us in God, and make the same possible for everyone. That's the only good news that's actually good news. That's the only way the gospel can exist in the world today. So as we gather here today, there's a few things that I want you to do. Don't leave here today without adding your voice to the One campaign. Be a part of what's happening. There's a place where you can fill out your name and your zip code. If you have an email, add that as well. Make it an offering of your voice to be a part of this story. We're not looking for money. We're looking for people to come together to stand up and speak for what we believe in. Wear a white wristband. Take some, share them with others. Invite them into this story as well. And if you haven't had the chance to see this film, The Lazarus Effect, I encourage you and I want you to find time to watch it. It's only about a half an hour long. It's an amazing story. You can watch it right at our church's website, templelutheran.org. But take time to see the incredible transformation of lives that we call the Lazarus Effect. Be a part of this worldwide gathering of hope. Let the story of death and resurrection truly define your faith and your life. I want to finish by showing just another short video clip that will allow us to meditate on this amazing transformation from death to life that we call the Lazarus Effect. This amazing change as people are resurrected from their beds. Thank you for being here today.
It was dark when I found you. I'll build you a house in the oak tree outside, and you can come back whenever you'd like. Don't be frightened, I'll set you up right, 'cause everyone needs somebody sometime. I'll leave the light on so you know I'm at home, and you can come in. You won't be alone. Don't be scared of the night, 'cause I'll fix you up right, 'cause everyone needs somebody,